Ricardas Puisys was a 23-year-old Lithuanian man whose life ended in circumstances that exposed the darkest aspects of modern slavery and exploitation in Britain. His disappearance in September 2015 and the eventual discovery of his remains would reveal a story of systematic abuse, trafficking, and a justice system that struggled to provide answers to his grieving family. Ricardas arrived in Britain seeking the promise of work and a better life, like thousands of other Eastern European migrants who came to the UK looking for legitimate employment. Instead, he fell into the hands of traffickers who exploited vulnerable people for profit. He was forced to work in conditions that amounted to slavery, his documents taken from him, his wages stolen, and his freedom stripped away. The men who controlled him used violence, intimidation, and isolation to keep him trapped in this exploitation. In the weeks before his disappearance, Ricardas managed to contact his family back in Lithuania. These conversations would later prove crucial in understanding what happened to him. He told his sister Jolanta that he was being held against his will, that he was being forced to work without pay, and that he was afraid. He described being beaten and controlled by men who threatened him. His family, hundreds of miles away and unable to help directly, urged him to contact the police or find a way to escape. On September 26, 2015, Ricardas was reported missing in Wisbech, a market town in Cambridgeshire that had become home to a large Eastern European migrant population. The area's agricultural industry relied heavily on migrant labor, and within this system, vulnerabilities were easily exploited. When someone disappears in such circumstances, the initial response is critical. However, the investigation into Ricardas's disappearance faced challenges from the start. For months, there was no trace of him. His family in Lithuania desperately sought answers, making repeated contacts with British authorities and trying to understand what had happened to their son and brother. The case highlighted the difficulties families face when a loved one goes missing in a foreign country, navigating unfamiliar legal systems and language barriers while dealing with overwhelming grief and frustration. In June 2016, 9 months after Ricardas was reported missing, human remains were discovered in a wooded area near Wisbech. The location was remote, and the remains were significantly decomposed, making identification difficult. It would take until December 2016, more than a year after his disappearance, for DNA analysis to confirm that the remains were those of Ricardas Puisys. The cause of death could not be determined due to the state of decomposition. The discovery and identification of Ricardas's body did not bring closure to his family. Instead, it opened up more questions about what had happened in his final days and hours, and why the investigation had taken so long to progress. An inquest would eventually be held, but the inability to determine how Ricardas died meant that many questions would remain unanswered. The investigation revealed that Ricardas had been living and working in conditions that met the legal definition of modern slavery. He was one of many victims of labor exploitation in Britain's agricultural sector, where gangmasters and traffickers prey on vulnerable migrants. These operations often involve taking workers' identification documents, confiscating their wages, housing them in overcrowded and substandard accommodation, and using threats and violence to maintain control. 2 men were eventually arrested in connection with the exploitation of Ricardas and other workers. In 2017, they were convicted of modern slavery offenses, but not in connection with his death. The convictions related to the forced labor and exploitation of multiple victims. The sentences handed down were criticized by anti-trafficking campaigners as inadequate given the severity of the crimes and their devastating impact on victims. The failure to determine how Ricardas died has left his family without full justice. They have spoken publicly about their frustration with the investigation, the delays in identifying his body, and what they see as an inadequate response from authorities. Savanna Puisys became a vocal advocate, speaking to media and campaigners about her brother's case and the wider issue of modern slavery in Britain. Ricardas's case exposed significant failings in how Britain identifies and protects victims of modern slavery. Despite the introduction of the Modern Slavery Act in 2015, which was supposed to strengthen protections and increase prosecutions, vulnerable workers continued to fall through the cracks. The coordination between police forces, immigration authorities, labor inspectors, and social services remained inadequate. Ricardas's story also highlighted the specific vulnerabilities faced by migrants from Eastern Europe. Language barriers, unfamiliarity with British laws and systems, fear of authorities, and isolation from support networks all contributed to making these individuals easy targets for exploitation. Many victims of trafficking and forced labor never come forward because they fear deportation, retaliation from their exploiters, or simply do not know where to turn for help. The agricultural sector in East Anglia, where Ricardas was exploited, has long been identified as a high-risk area for labor exploitation. The seasonal nature of the work, the reliance on migrant labor, and the use of gangmasters create conditions where abuse can flourish. Despite increased scrutiny and regulation, reports of exploitation continue to emerge from the region. For Ricardas's family, the pain of his loss is compounded by the knowledge that he reached out for help and that help did not come in time. His communications with his sister before he disappeared showed that he knew he was in danger. The question of whether more could have been done to protect him remains a source of anguish. The investigation into Ricardas's death remains technically open, though no one has been charged in connection with it. The passage of time and the condition of his remains when found mean that the likelihood of new evidence emerging is slim. His family continues to seek answers and justice, knowing they may never receive either. Ricardas Puisys's case serves as a reminder that modern slavery is not a historical phenomenon, but a present reality affecting thousands of people in Britain today. Behind the statistics and policy discussions are individuals like Ricardas, people who came seeking opportunity and instead found exploitation and tragedy. His story demands that society does better in identifying victims, prosecuting traffickers, and preventing vulnerable people from falling into the hands of those who would exploit them.
On the morning of September 4, 2001, Savanna Todd left her home in Bremerton, Washington, telling her family she was heading to the nearby mall. She planned to meet friends and spend a typical late summer day shopping and socializing. It was a Tuesday, and the new school year had just begun. Savanna was a junior at Olympic High School, known for her bright personality and close relationships with family and friends. She never returned home that day, and her disappearance would become one of Washington State's most enduring missing persons cases. Savanna lived with her mother and stepfather in Bremerton, a city located on the Kitsap Peninsula across Puget Sound from Seattle. She was described by those who knew her as outgoing, friendly, and responsible. She had no history of running away and no apparent reason to vanish voluntarily. When she failed to come home that evening, her family immediately knew something was wrong. The Bremerton Police Department began investigating Savanna's disappearance as soon as it was reported. Detectives interviewed her friends, family members, and anyone who might have seen her that day. They traced her movements from her home and attempted to establish a timeline. What they discovered raised immediate concerns. Savanna had indeed gone to the Kitsap Mall as she had told her family, but she never met up with the friends she had planned to see. Witnesses reported seeing her at the mall, but accounts of her activities there were limited. At some point during that day, Savanna's trail went cold. There were no credible sightings after she left the mall area, no phone calls, and no indication of where she might have gone. Investigators explored every possibility. They looked into whether Savanna might have run away, though nothing in her background suggested this was likely. They examined her personal relationships, her school life, and any potential conflicts or problems she might have been facing. They found nothing that explained her sudden disappearance. Nearly 2 months after Savanna vanished, on October 26, 2001, a shocking discovery was made. A property owner in Elsenburg, a city located approximately 130 miles southeast of Bremerton, found human remains partially buried on their land. The location was remote and rural, far from where Savanna was last seen. The remains were badly decomposed, making immediate identification impossible. Forensic anthropologists were called in to examine the body and attempt to determine identity, cause of death, and how long the remains had been at that location. The Ricardas County authorities who were handling the discovery had no immediate connection to link these remains to any specific missing persons case. It would take months of forensic analysis before investigators could confirm what Savanna's family had feared. Dental records finally established that the remains found in Elsenburg were those of Savanna Todd. The confirmation came in early 2002, devastating her family and transforming the missing person investigation into a homicide case. The cause and manner of Savanna's death could not be definitively determined due to the advanced state of decomposition. However, the circumstances strongly suggested foul play. The location where her body was found, the distance from where she was last seen, and the fact that she was buried all pointed to homicide rather than accident or natural causes. Investigators now faced the difficult task of piecing together what had happened to Savanna between September 4th, when she disappeared from Bremerton, and when her body was left in Elsenburg. How did she travel that distance? Who was she with? What happened in the hours or days between her disappearance and her death? Detectives worked to identify anyone who had connections to both the Bremerton area and Elsenburg. They interviewed potential witnesses again, hoping that the discovery of Savanna's body might prompt someone to come forward with information they had previously withheld. They examined vehicle records, phone records, and any other evidence that might establish a link between the two locations. Over the years, investigators developed several theories about what happened to Savanna. One possibility was that she had been abducted by a stranger, someone who saw her at the mall or in the surrounding area and took advantage of an opportunity. Random abductions, while relatively rare, do occur, and the lack of any obvious connection between Savanna and her killer could suggest this scenario. Another theory focused on the possibility that Savanna knew her killer, at least casually. Perhaps she had accepted a ride from someone or had agreed to go somewhere with a person she had met recently. Investigators looked at anyone in Savanna's orbit who might have had access to transportation and knowledge of the Elsenburg area. Despite extensive investigation, no arrests have been made in Savanna's case. If investigators identified a primary suspect, they have not made that information public. The lack of physical evidence from the crime scene, combined with the deterioration of the body, limited what forensic analysis could reveal. Savanna's family has never stopped seeking answers. Her mother has been a vocal advocate for keeping the case in the public eye, giving interviews to local media and working with cold case advocates. The family has endured more than 20 years of uncertainty about exactly what happened to Savanna and frustration that no one has been held accountable. The emotional toll on families of unsolved homicide victims is immeasurable. Birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries become markers of loss rather than celebration. The absence of justice compounds the grief, leaving families in a perpetual state of limbo, unable to fully process their loss when so many questions remain unanswered. In recent years, advances in DNA technology and forensic genealogy have brought renewed hope to cold cases across the country. Investigators have reportedly re-examined evidence from Savanna's case using newer technologies that were not available in 2001 and 2002. Whether this re-examination has produced new leads remains unclear, as investigators typically do not discuss active case details publicly. The Bremerton Police Department and Ricardas County authorities maintain that the case remains open and active. They continue to encourage anyone with information about Savanna's disappearance or death to come forward, emphasizing that even seemingly insignificant details could prove crucial to solving the case. More than 20 years after Savanna Todd disappeared from a shopping mall in Bremerton, fundamental questions remain unanswered. Who took her from that familiar place where she should have been safe? How did she end up so far away in Elsenburg? What happened in the time between her disappearance and her death? And most importantly, who is responsible for taking her life? Savanna was just 17 years old when she died. She never got to finish high school, never went to prom, never experienced the milestones of young adulthood. Someone knows what happened to her. Someone holds the key to giving her family the answers and justice they have sought for over 2 decades.